It's sort of GG, no re. Today it's a shallow roster. We've got Daniel and Tim. Say hello.
Hello.
Why are there only two members? And it's only the best members, honestly. But the reason is that we're doing a topical conversation because our schedules have been so messed up by the holidays. And Daniel being sick last time. He had a man cold, which prevented him from running a D&D game. You hate to see it, failing those con checks. It's really a terrible, ludicrous display. But we are going to talk about Red Dead Redemption 2, which is a video game that came out last year and has recently been released on PC, and its relation to tabletop gaming, D&D. And the reason only Tim is here is because he and I are the only people that have played it. So these are the opinions that you should care about. So, and fortuitously, the best D&D module reviewer, Bryce Lynch, at 10footpole.org, has just released a review of Red Dead Redemption 2, and his was mostly negative. And while that's not going to be the focus of what we talk about, we will address those points. Mostly what we want to talk about is things we found in the game, their influence, and their genesis from D&D, and then how you can reincorporate them or modify the procedures that you use as a player or DM to make your game better, using Red Dead as an example. So that's what we'll start to talk about. So Red Dead Redemption, I've played through the start of the 4th chapter, which is like less than halfway through the story, I think. I think that's about right. I think there's 6 chapters and some epilogues. There's going to be no spoilers, by the way, in this podcast. So if you've not played it yet, don't worry. I don't think. We'll try not to spoil it anyway. No story spoilers. Maybe some like random encounter spoilers.
Yeah.
Tim, you've beaten it, right?
Correct.
Okay. And how would you say, so in general, it's a sandbox Rockstar game like Grand Theft Auto, but with horses and 6 shooters. So you've got a large sandbox that you can explore pretty freely, as well as scripted, pretty much on rails story missions that tell the story of a particular character. Like there's no character creator, you're just one guy. And you go through that guy's story without much in the way of dramatic decisions you can make. Maybe there's some at the end that I haven't gotten to yet, but so far, not a whole lot.
I think that's basically how all their games have been.
Yep.
GTA and Red Dead Redemption 1, so I mean, it's no shocker there.
So that's the kind of game that it is. Like I said, have spent, I'm not halfway through it yet, but already I can tell it's one of my favorite games of all time. Probably top 5. It's really, really good. Maybe I'm just a sucker for Westerns and the kind of simulation-y stuff that it gets into. That's something that has been criticized for a lot, having very slow, methodical pacing, a languid pacing, you might say, in all kinds of things, both in the actions that you take and the game as a whole and its overall structure.
Yeah, it really put me off at first. And we were discussing this, and you said you ran across somebody who used that term languid. Eventually, I would say it was, I would come and say it's very intentional. And I can see it having its downsides for many people because of so many games I'm wanting to respect my time when I'm playing them, because I play so many, and it's, being an adult, you don't want to play games that waste your time. But in this game, because of its commitment to an extent of being simulationist, I really did appreciate all those little details that they put into it, and I grew to enjoy them, and I didn't begrudge them.
Yeah, that's my opinion as well. I guess we'll go ahead and address some of the criticisms that Bryce gave, and we will link to the article in our show notes page, which should be ggnorecast.com/182. And we've already discussed a few of them. Animations were slow and tedious, which is true. Getting off and on your horse is not nearly as quick as it would be in other games. Like when you skin animals, there's a whole animation that goes through that. When you loot bodies, you don't just press a button. You have to pick them up.
Opening doors, looting dressers and cabinets. And I mean, everything is going to have an animation to it pretty much. And you can't skip those things. Which I got his criticism, because at first I was just like, oh gosh, come on. But as I really got into the world and started appreciating the stories, and I was just diving into it and getting lost in it, I was like, it helped to create that immersion for me.
Yeah, and the tedium makes you focus, I think. Like you can't just go hunting random things because you think, do I really want to spend 20 minutes on this hunting trip and I can only fit like one big skin on my horse?
Right, yeah. It's like I can't just go hunting a bunch of stuff. It's like, hey, I happened upon a 3-star, elk or something, and I want that, and I got it. It's like, well, I can't just keep hunting. Like I
Yeah,
gotta,
got to go back home.
yeah, I
And
gotta take it back,
I like that
and
because
I can't fast travel. Like I gotta take it back.
yeah, and that enforces the same kind of decisions that you would make if you were there, which is the
Exactly.
simulationist impulse. Which, if you, I can imagine playing this game for like the fourth time or something, you would just detest that because you just want to carry on
Yeah,
with the game. But at least for a
yeah,
first time playthrough, I'm loving that. But your patience will be tested, I suppose.
yeah. And it's even to the extent. I mean, and, on the simulationist perspective, it's like, you put that giant, pelt on the back of your horse. It's to the extent of if you wade through deep waters of a river, like that thing will come off if you go too deep in the water. It'll come off and it'll start floating down the river, and you got to retrieve it or you've lost it. Or if you something happens and you get waylaid on your way back and your horse freaks out and rears up, it's going to fall off, and you got to remember to put it back on there. You lost it. That happened to me once or twice. Like I just didn't realize it came off.
Oh yeah,
So
I
it's
got
one of those assumptions that, oh, it's gamey. I put it on there and that's good. I basically have it now that I put it on my horse. Nope, you actually got to return it before, or you could lose it.
Yeah, I had an ambush. I won't specify the details for spoiler reasons, but I was on the road, and this gang. There are gangs in various or factions, like you'd have in a hex crawl or whatever, that will ambush you on the road in various ways. And this one way they did it was specifically designed to spook my horse and make it rear up and drop me, which it did, and the big pelt I was carrying. And then all these guys came out from the woods to shoot me. So it uses the simulationist mechanics in gameplay dynamics really well, I think. So,
Yeah, there's good synergy between
yep.
them.
Bryce also mentioned technical issues on PC, which is totally true.
No doubt.
It was a big problem, but it's been out for like a month now as of this recording, and mine runs just fine. And I
Yeah,
think yours
I
does too.
saw something come up in the feed, my news feed today, that said they issued yet another patch that supposedly has fixed a lot more issues. But I mean, yeah, I probably played it for two solid weeks, maybe. I probably put in 60 plus hours, but I mean, I had a lot of crashes to desktop, like everybody else. So, but eventually towards the end, my last 20 hours or so, it was pretty stable. But yeah, it's unfortunate that it had such a rocky release, for a port that is a technical marvel. Honestly, it's just a beautiful game. But
Yeah, it's a definite PC burden. Like, I mean, I was doing everything. I was searching for tips. I was going into game install files and deleting certain files with certain extensions, and all the workarounds that you have to do in a horror scenario. I have had to do, but now it's ironed out. So if you get it on Steam when it comes out later, you should be good. Another thing that Bryce mentioned were poor rewards. That's how you pronounce that in English for mini games and side quests, which is totally true. But I
yeah,
don't care.
yeah, the mini. I'm thinking mini games. Poker based games. The knife one.
Five finger fillet.
Yeah, five finger fillet. That kind of stuff. Yeah, it's not. It's not really worth doing other than for challenges if you want to get the achievements, I guess.
Yeah, I just had fun doing them sometimes. But
Yeah, I tried them out just to see what it's like.
if the
But
rewards were too good, people would just play poker all the time to get money. So
right, for true.
I see why they don't do that. But I found
And,
the hunting quest that you do that for cosmetics basically with some mechanical
right.
incentive. But cosmetics were enough for me. Like there are ways to upgrade your camp with stuff that's even as dumb as putting a pelt over a log. But that's all the incentive I need. I want a pelt on a log.
Yeah, some of them, like I got some of the early ones, the low hanging fruit, but and I really wanted to be able to upgrade everything 'cause that's just kind of my tendency when I play games. But at some point, I was just like, yeah, I need multiple times. I need to find 4 level, max level deer pelts or something like that. I was like, that's a lot of there's a lot of games I have in my backlog, so I didn't want to spend too much time doing it. But I did appreciate it. Like I scrolled through like all the different like if you go to the hunters that can give you you can turn in the legendary animal pelts too.
Yeah, the trapper.
Yeah, the trap, yeah, that guy. And you can look at the different outfits. Like they were cool. I like them. And I was like, oh man, that'd be fun to have. Like if I was gonna play this for like go into online or do it more than just the story, that would be fun to do. But it's not the kind of game that I felt like I didn't want to dive into that deep into it. But if it was gave you significant mechanical benefits and stuff, maybe in more RPG heavy games then that would incentivize me to do those kind of things.
And the last thing he talked about was how the story missions are on rails. And that's also completely true. A lot of times it will take agency away from you, like make you do a certain tactic, like go in a house or stay out of a house, and fail you if you don't after a certain timer elapses, or it'll reduce your armory. You can't carry in the weapons that you normally would use and that kind of thing. And there's not a lot of choices that you make, as far as I know. At least through half the game, there haven't been a lot of choices. But that doesn't really bother me. That's how all the Rockstar games are. I wish that it weren't that way. It is basically like a interactive movie that you get to do a sandbox in between movie segments. And because the sandbox action is so good in between the cutscene story missions, the story missions being on rails doesn't really bother me as much as it otherwise would. And that it is a linear story, but its linearity is broken up by being overlaid on this completely non-linear interface that you're dealing with most of the time.
Yeah, and I'm definitely more, I think, amenable to on rails story stuff. I don't mind it as much. Honestly, the sandboxiness, I get flustered by too much sandbox. I'm not a big fan of having too much freedom because then I get overwhelmed. I'm like, I don't know what to do. But I did appreciate it. It had a nice balance for me because there were times where I might just be wandering around and see stuff, and I wanted to enjoy the world because it was so well crafted. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna hunt now, and I'm gonna do this stuff. And came upon this random quest or encounter on the road, and I would follow that rabbit trail and just do it, and it was fun and enjoyable. And then there'd be a point where I'd be like, okay, I feel like I want to advance the story now because I understood that it wanted me to just do this story, do this one, do this one, do this one. And yeah, there weren't really any choices, but it was still, I thought it was a decent story, and I liked all the characters. There were some characters I really liked, and there's some where I was like, oh man, I can't wait to see you get yours, kind of a thing. And in the end, just my overall take on the story, especially with the main character, I loved what they did with the main character and his overall arc.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. I will have to
Yeah.
see. That's what I've heard from everybody.
And there's some nice surprises of that. I loved it.
So let's move into talking about comparisons between Red Dead and tabletop. So the first is the setting. I think Westerns are perfectly usable for D&D conversions because they're actually technologically not that much different from medieval settings, with the addition of sometimes electricity and guns. But other than that, it's pretty much the same.
And or fantastical beasts.
Yeah.
I
Because
can see
you can do the same kinds of things, like this whole hunting cycle. So the way it works is you're out in the world, you're on the sandbox, you're hex crawling, you're point crawling, whatever. And you could imagine that the DM, in addition to whatever encounter tables he has, maybe if you don't get a random encounter, you get a wildlife encounter as your null result. So instead of nothing, there's wildlife that you see, because there's always wildlife like at every second when you're out in the world. So if you were going to do this on a tabletop, you would have to have a secondary table, or preferably use a generator so it was instantaneous. But there's wildlife of various kinds appropriate to the biome that you're in, and they have certain rarities modified by day-night cycles, yada yada. And each one of these can either be ignored, you can just say there's a herd of deer moving through, or you can engage with them to hunt them. You might want to hunt them because you can sell the pelts and materials, or you can use them to craft certain things. So you can put an NPC in your game that will craft relevant clothing items from creature types, whether they're monsters or normal fauna. And a cool thing it does is it gives rarity and quality ratings to the different creatures, and you can, from 1 to 3 stars, and that affects everything like their price and so forth. And you could randomize that easily once you interact with a creature or observe it for a while. So I mean, all that could just be ported straight in without much trouble at all to have this additional layer to your wilderness where you can do hunting if you want, or at least know what kind of wildlife is around there. I don't know if I did that. I don't know that you guys would really care about it unless the money was good. But even then, I don't think you would really. I don't think we would want to spend time interacting with that, though.
Yeah, I think the question would be like, what can we gain from a low quality versus a high quality? I mean, to spend time of it to spend time on it, I would think the benefits would really need to be substantial.
Yeah, I can just imagine me saying there are rolls dice. Wait, here, we'll do sound effects here. There are 3d6 deer. What do you do? Well, we just continue to the dungeon. It's probably
Yeah.
what's going to happen.
Like, okay. I mean, unless I need rations or something because, I'm out of food, and because I'm out of food, it's going to have this penalty upon me, that's going to be bad. Because like in Red Dead, if you haven't eaten in a while, your core goes down, which affects how quickly you can regenerate your health or
Yeah.
your stamina or
And
whatever.
you could do a similar mechanic by, like in 5e, you at short rest can spend HD to regain HP. You could have a negative modifier to that roll if you haven't eaten in a while, or a positive one if you've eaten good stuff. You can do
Right.
stuff like that. But yeah, it's just D&D is so fantastic that just doing mundane hunting is probably a waste of your time.
Yeah.
Unless the player specifically requests, I want to go hunting now, or unless you're doing like a what do you call it, Stone Age game, and you're just that's what it's all about. I think there was one called Wolf Packs and Winter Snow that came out not too long ago. It could make sense for there. But we've just described the mechanics that you would need. I mean, just write them down. You're good, and it works really well. Sometimes you ignore hunting, but other times you go for it because it's just what you need right now. I just want to have some fun.
Yep.
The story and campaign. We've already talked about how it works in the game. Is this something we would want in a role-playing game? What do you think, Tim? The way it's implemented, where you just have like a marker on the map, so the DM would just say, "Whenever you guys ready, this guy has a quest for you," basically, or literally give you a quest card, and it's just
I
out there.
I mean, I know in video games, I like it when there's a clear indication of, okay, if I want to make progress on this game as a thing, like this is what I need to do. But if I want to experience other stuff, which could be rewarding or interesting, but is not necessarily going to progress through the actual game from point A to point B, I like that in video games just because it just helps me gauge how much is there for me to do, and I like knowing like, okay, I've done this much and have this much to go, and then I put that on my mental list of how close am I to finishing this game so I can get to the next game, but I still enjoy it as I go. But I don't know, in a tabletop, I don't know. I think in a tabletop, I still like clear indicators of, okay, this is most likely the thing that I need to do if there is a overarching story, campaign, whatever. I do like that to be obvious. I don't think I like it when it's just like, okay, well, you arrived in town, there you go. Now it's up to the players to be crafty and ask questions and figure it out. I mean, I can see that as being fun if it's player skill, but at the same time, be like, well, what if we're all just a bunch of idiots and we just never do anything? Well, eventually you're going to throw us a bone. It's like, well, maybe just give us a clear indicator of, yeah, there's stuff to do if we want to do it, and we can just do the normal goofy stuff that D&D players do, but it's also obvious if we want to get those hooks and then act on them.
Yeah, I think there's a gradient of ways it could be implemented. Like the most hands-off way I was thinking about is when players enter a new town, you give them nodes or handholds that they can grasp onto that are clear indicators of there's stuff this way. Like the most obvious thing is the tavern. So you could just put a card out there or a note, or just say, if you are having fun doing the side quests or just hex crawling and exploring, carry on. But if you're ready for new stuff to be interjected, go to the tavern and you'll get rumors and that kind of thing. Or
Yeah.
or let's say you're in a campaign where the PCs are all members of a like insurgent militia, and they're carrying out raids and attacks against the occupying force or something like that, like the elves. The elves are occupying you or whatever. Well, you could just, if there's side content out there, like you've got an open world sandbox kind of thing with dungeons that you can go and get loot and level up to better fight the elves, and maybe you want to do that for a session. But I could see where you could have like quest cards or just a note on the map or something where the players know at any time they can clearly say, no, I want to go do a raid against the elves, and this is the raid information, and I can just press that button, and we're shifting modes of play right now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's like in The Witcher, where it's like, oh, we had your main quest markers that you would always have, and you knew where to go. Or maybe you want to go to the bounty board, and that was you knew stuff on the bounty board was always side content.
Yep.
Or if you just explored, you can also just explore. But you always knew, okay, this is the obvious place to go next if you want to do that.
So the next, I think we talked out. Oh, and the story missions in Red Dead are very scripted on rails. You can easily fail them by thinking creatively. So that's not something we would want at all. But,
Yeah.
I mean, you can imagine Red Dead missions not being that way. The problem is that the games are so expensive and they have to craft dialogue that's motion capped for every single result. So they
Right.
don't want to have to deal with those contingencies. So that's why they do it that way. But we in tabletop, you would just spring a situation on somebody and see what happens, even if it was a planned story encounter. So random encounters. There are random encounters, just like in a tabletop game in Red Dead. You're going along and then the system will determine that you encounter X guy on the road and then something plays out. I love these so far. They're great.
Yeah, they were always entertaining, and I almost always engaged with them. There were only a couple times toward the end where it happened, and I was like, "Nah." I'm like, I've done this variant before, and I don't want to do it again. But that was rare. Like, there weren't many times where it was just an obvious repetition. There were some, but there were lots of different kinds that always made me interested to just stop and do it. And sometimes it was a variant of a certain type, but I felt obligated to do it because I was like, well, I feel like I should because I'm choosing this path for my character, and my character would do this.
Right.
And they were not tedious so much that felt like it was a burden to do it.
The types of them are interesting. They're almost always interactive in some way, but not always. So sometimes there's just a point of interest along that you can easily detect from whatever path you're on. And there's just good stuff there. There's just stuff to loot, and that's it. Or someone, you go to interact with them, and they just die, and then you can loot the body. So there's situations like that. There are also situations that are tricks, where some people appear to be friendly, but then try to kill you and take your stuff.
Yep.
There's purely hostile engagements where you just get ambushed, sometimes with no indication, sometimes you see an encampment and get the element of surprise and can engage with them however you want. Which those are really fun. I almost always do those, even though if I say, I recognize the type now and I say, oh, this is one of the ones where you see the enemy gang and you can engage with them on your own terms. I still do those lots of times just for fun. And because I feel like that's what my character would do. And then there are other types where you have to make a choice between how to deal with someone. It's usually not that complex. Like, do you help the person? Do you have a particular item that would help the person? And then later you'll see that person in town and they might follow up with you and give you a reward or say thank you, which is nice. You can do that kind of thing in your own games.
Yeah, that's how early on I got one of the weapons I used for a good while. My first long range semi-sniper rifle with a scope.
Yep,
It's like I helped a dude, and he was like, "Hey, I got credit at the store. Get anything you want." I was like, "Well, I'm gonna get the most expensive rifle I can get,"
Yeah.
and I got it and used my own money to put a scope on it, and I used that for quite a while.
And the other type that I like is when there are factions that will have their own interaction that plays out whether you intervene or not. And
Yeah.
those are great because you can sit and watch, but the longer you watch, the more out of control things will get, and you might not be able to influence the outcome to your desire. So there's a tension, and it's complex, which is good. And you can do that easily in your D&D games, have the factions of bandits or whatever, or monsters be talking or working something out or making a trade or fighting or whatever kind of thing. So all these random encounters, when you play the game, you should be able to port them over one by one or one to your D&D game. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is simulationist mechanics. So there are a ton in Red Dead, in addition to the animations, which enforce a kind of simulationism by making things take a long time and therefore making you decide whether or not you want to waste the time doing them. We do have some things like that in D&D. Like, we know if you engage a particular game procedure, you're going to be there for a while. Like, do I really want to have this fight on a grid? Because if I do, I'm going to spend the next at least 15 minutes doing this in real time. But it has other simulationist mechanics as well, like cleaning your guns. They degrade over time with use and with wear. So if you keep them out in your hands when you go through a river, I think it degrades them faster. If you keep them out in the rain, the same thing. And then you have to spend a resource, which is gun oil, which you can only carry so much of, and spend time literally mashing a button to clean the weapon off, to restore its functionality. Same thing with, like, when you take a bath, you have to keep mashing the button. Skinning requires you to get down off your horse, go to the animal, press the button, get the thing, pick it back up manually, put it back on your horse manually, and then get back on your horse. So these things, like I said, they are already divisive in real life in the game. So I don't mind them, but I think if you use something similar in your tabletop game, you're going to get the same divisiveness from your players.
Yeah, I think in a tabletop where it's all just, mostly you can say, oh, well, I do this. It's not a complex thing. I'm just going to do it, and I need to spend time doing it. You can just kind of skip through that. Like, you can just say you do it. Like, there's not a reason to have a mechanic for it and roll on it. I mean, unless you just want to be really hard-nosed about it. So in a tabletop, I would be like, nah, that's fine. I don't really care about it. But in this game, even though in most games it might irk me, in this game, it was done well enough, from a technical standpoint, with animations and stuff like that, that I at least appreciated the work that went into it, so I didn't mind it as much, I guess. And it added to the overall experience because it all worked together to create the immersiveness and the simulationist perspective. They were consistent, about it.
Let's think about if we had a mechanic where you could skin monsters to get rare parts, and if we made that process take a long time. Is there, like, to say instead of just you say you skin the monster, here's what you get off of it, or maybe roll on the table, here's what you get off of it? Would there be any benefit to saying, okay, first, we see you getting down there, breaking out the knife and doing the skinning. Where do you skin it from? Make a skill check. Like,
I mean,
and
yeah,
continuing to go through that process, like, would there be any benefit to that?
only if there was like something really good I could get out of it. It's
Yeah.
like, why do I want to spend my time doing this? And, either you make it a requirement for some other overall mechanic that's in the game, like where I can't avoid it, and I got to do it to some extent, at least the bare minimum, or if it's optional, there needs to be some sort of incentive for me to want to spend the time bothering with that.
I think there's a big difference also between this being a single player experience versus multiplayer.
Yes.
When there's a bunch of people sitting around waiting for this to happen. If you've got 6 wolves to skin and each one is going to take a minute in real time, that's just going to get unsupportable, I think.
Yeah.
So I think in tabletop, this is one situation where these mechanics that at least are partially effective in a video game just would be terrible in tabletop. I think you should just do a skill check and be done with it.
It's terrible.
Terrible. And there are rumors of a medieval Rockstar game. Rockstar is the studio that made this game and GTA. Thoughts on that? I think it would be amazing. It would be like I said, Westerns are already so close to being medieval that an actual medieval game with swords and bows and magic and stuff would be spectacular. I mean, this game is already good, so if you just skinned it to be in medieval times and have dungeons, it'd be great.
Yeah, if they were able to bring the same quality to something fantastical, I'd play it.
Yeah, I had this experience in Red Dead where I found this is not a spoiler because you're horrible. You're like a sociopath if you design a map that has a waterfall in it and there's not a cave behind the waterfall.
Yeah.
So I
I was there.
went through such a cave, and you have to use a lantern for, like, decrement your torches, okay, guys? You had to use a lantern, and it was extremely spooky.
That cave was so old school D&D.
I don't want to spoil anything about what's in there, if there's anything in there. I don't want to spoil it. But just simply having a light and navigating without a map was great. Like, it made me apprehensive, and I hated being there, but also enjoyed the commitment. And I was paying attention to everything in there, like the artifacts of human civilization that may or may not have been there. I was thinking, like, what does this mean? What does this signify? I'm about to get wrecked because I'm seeing this random tool on the ground. Anyway, it was great. So
Did you know and or look for the treasure that was in that cave?
I did not have anything leading me to the cave. I was just exploring and went into a cave.
I'm just going to go ahead and say there's a treasure in that cave, and if you actually looked for it, like trying to find it and where you have to go to find it, man, it was nerve-wracking and claustrophobic.
We'll have to talk off the cast about if I found what you're talking about. I don't think I did, but we'll have to chat. But yeah, the process of exploring that cave was amazing, and it's what exploring a D&D cave should be, and sometimes is like. The main difference is that I don't think we make D&D caves as claustrophobic as real caves in this cave is, because you're always crouching down or squeezing through, and when you get to an open space, it's a relief that, oh, I can finally not freak out about being squeezed in and extremely vulnerable at all times.
Because I think most D&D caves they're trying to keep it, they're designing them with lots of encounters taken into consideration. And they're like, well, if you got to have encounter, you got to have open spaces. So they make a lot of open spaces in their caves, quote unquote.
Yeah, and Veins of the Earth tries to get at this as well. Verticality is very important, and just being really unsure if you can go down safely and get back up somewhere. Like, am I gonna fall off
Yeah.
this slanted place into a pit that's bottomless? Like, is there gonna be a rock slide if I do this? It's just it makes just walking around an extremely dicey dicey affair.
Ooh.
So yeah, highly recommended, at least for the cave exploration. I think that's all of our talking points that we had. Do you have any closing thoughts, Timotheus?
Other than it's a pretty dang good game, I highly recommend it. If you don't have a lot of patience for the open world stuff, the sandboxy stuff, which I generally don't, just go straight to the missions and do it. I think it's worth it and it's fun.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be pretty cheap on consoles by now, and by the time this episode airs, it should be relatively stable on PC. I have spent most of my time not doing the story and just messing around in free play sandbox mode, and have been loving it. And I love the story so far too. It's just so much better than most games. The writing is better, the voice acting is fantastic, animations are great. So it's just high quality product. And if you get sick of not hearing enough GG No Re Alabama content with this kind of twang, you can just boot up old Red Dead and hear all the southern accents you want to.
Sure, I reckon.
GG No Re.